The housing market is, as you mentioned, is white hot in terms of buying a home. Some areas, the rental market is also closed up.
Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. We are back with a brand new video. Are you hearing those rumors about the U.S. housing shortage? Yes guys, today our video is all about the U.S. housing shortage. We are going to prove that it's just a myth or selling technique that makes up this myth of housing shortage. If you are new here, subscribe to our channel and support us. Let's get into the video. In 2021, during the deadly pandemic and such a massive economic crisis, the home prices and real estate values are surging across the U.S. Such a sarcastic situation, right? Everyone is arguing over this topic that the prices spike high because of the housing shortage. This can be true in economic terms, as when the supply decreases, the price increases here. This is not the correct fact. In 2005, the permitting and construction of new homes collapsed by 2.2 million and to 600,000 by 2001 after the last housing crash. It took another 5 years for developers and builders to get back to normal levels of home construction. This is the argument that was placed for this housing shortage. But the reality is just opposite to this. The U.S. is starting to see a decline in the demand for housing by the public. First, we have to analyze the argument. The argument that every mainstream media pundit refers to is likely to decline in home construction that occurred after the great financial crash from 2008 to 2014. But that's not what is happening in 2021. It's precisely the opposite. The housing demand has declined, not the financial status or the construction. According to the 2008-14 census, permits for single-family homes declined by 1.7 million in 2005 to 400,000 in 2010. Just a massive decline by 70%. Similarly, for larger multifamily and condo building, permitting was cut in half over the period of time. The fall was terrible for the U.S. at that time. The decline from 2008 to 14 was a long-term housing shortage, but the shortage was based on supply and demand. Both the factors were prominent, but the permitting only talks about the supply. But the true answer lies in demand. The second element is declining births, increasing deaths. The population can be a significant factor in the supply and demand of the housing sector. Without the growth in the population, demand for housing can't go higher. As per the census, the U.S. is aging faster. The largest population growth in U.S. history was seen between 1946 and 1964, which was about 75 million people. And now they are getting old, which decreases the young people's percentage. The increase in wealth, education is resulting in lower fertility rates. Thus, the net result is the decline in birth rates. In the year 2000, the U.S. registered 4.0 to 4.3 million births per year. Then the figure declined to 3.7 to 3.9 million in recent years. On the contrary, the number of deaths has also spiked. In Min 2000, the U.S. saw about 2.4 million deaths per year, and now that number has come to 2.8 to 3.1 million. One of the significant reasons for the recent inflation was COVID-19. So eventually, what will happen when births go down and death goes up? The natural increase in population. The U.S. has gone from adding 1.7 to 1.9 million people to fewer than 1 million each year from the last 2 years. This is eventually a terrible situation for the U.S. One, as the fertility rate has decreased, thus decreasing the birth of babies, who are the biggest driver of home demand. A family with children will demand more space and security than home ownership will provide. Fewer births lead to less demand for a couple to buy or upgrade their housing. Second, the increase in death will lead to an increase in existing demand for the housing market and thus increasing the demand for house sales. Unfortunately, as per the facts, the trend of decline in birth and increase in death has just started. Over the next upcoming 10 years, America is expecting the death figure to surge, and the baby boomer is beginning to age. The gap between the oldest baby boomers is 75 while the youngest is 56. Meanwhile, the fertility or birth rate is likely to continue its steady decline as more and more couples are prioritizing career and financial security over children. The next element is the decline in the migration of people. The natural increase is not the only way to add population and subsequently the demand for homes. A main way to increase the population is through international migration. The U.S. is one of the most desirable places for everyone to get settled and buy a home or rent one. Millions of people will be willing to come and get settled over in the U.S. But the problem is that international migration has also seen a steady decline, such as the natural increase in population for the last 2 decades. In early 2000, the immigration was above 1 million per year, but after 2016, it sees a steady decline of 500 to 600,000 since the last couple of years. The suspected reason for the decline in immigration is due to Donald Trump's ascendancy, and perhaps there might be a change in that after a new presidential administration of Joe Biden. The future will tell what will happen with immigration. Even though it might be challenging to predict the future, but immigration will bounce back soon. The COVID pandemic has frozen the world at a certain place and resulted in a decline in immigration, visa issuance by the U.S. government, and the present U.S. recession, which led to the loss of roughly 8 million jobs since its onset in February 2020. The net result: disclosure. In this part, we are disclosing the myth associated with the shortage of housing. Increased death, declining birth, and less international migration have affected a lot in the housing sector. The total population, which was once 2.5 million plus annually, collapsed to barely 1 million plus in 2020. It shows the drastic decline in population growth. At the same time, the increase in construction of new homes and apartment construction is picking up pace. The growth rate is increasing at such a high rate that in recent years, the permitting of new housing units will exceed the U.S. population growth in 2020. If it happens, this will be the first time in recent history. As per the graphs, which represent populations of the U.S. and the housing in the U.S., the aspects that will compare will be the population of the U.S., which includes the birth rate, death rate, and immigration rate. And next will be the new housing permitting rate. Both of these aspects will disclose the myth of the housing shortage in the U.S. If the ratio of population growth to new home licensing is high, it means that more demand is being created in the real estate. And on the contrary, if the figures go down, the supply will eventually go down. Hence, the supply will go to the people who gain from it. There is an equilibrium population to permitting ratio is 1.5, which means 1.5 people are added for every one permit. You might be thinking, why is the equilibrium above 1? It is so because not every new person will need their own home or apartment. The equilibrium ratio of the population permitting ratio dipped below 1.5 in the mid-2000s. This depicts that too many new houses and apartments were being built relative to how many people were being added to the U.S. population. Eventually, the housing market crashed shortly after that. Now again, since 2018, U.S. is below that 1.5 mark in 2019 and 2020. Especially the ratio of population to housing permit again went down to 1.1 and 0.8 respectively. That 0.8 figure means that more units of housing were being permitted than the population growth. Now, these findings of figures prove that housing has not got the shortage. It's the population that has decreased over the period of time, thus decreasing the demand for housing, and no one is willing to buy those houses. At the end of the video, it is pretty clear that all the arguing about the 2021 housing shortage or crash, all is just a pity myth and nothing more. The facts make it pretty damn clear. We can't predict the future of the real estate market or the housing market of the U.S., but the figures that come out are extremely concerning for the housing market. The figures directly contradict the notion that there is a vast shortage of homes in America. So guys, if you are new to our channel, please subscribe and hit that bell icon for more exciting videos. Till then, adios.